It's been years since some of the biggest shows on TV delivered their most shocking moments, and while many of those twists were meant to change their stories forever, a lot of them also risked completely ruining them. Some felt too cruel, too convenient, or too unbelievable to ever work. Yet they became some of the most unforgettable moments in television. And when you start looking at them together, they reveal something really interesting about how risky storytelling can actually pay off. In this video, I'm breaking down the most controversial plot twists across Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Dexter, The Boys, and Better Call Saul, and why they shouldn't have worked but somehow did. On the surface, one of the most shocking plot twists that comes to mind is from Breaking Bad, and it all happens because of something as mundane and human as needing to use the bathroom. Hank Schrader, the hard-nosed DEA agent who's been chasing the elusive Heisenberg for years, stumbles on the truth not through a dramatic arrest or a coded message, but because Walter White casually left a gift sitting in his bathroom. It was a copy of Leaves of Grass signed by Gale with a personal inscription to WW. The initials prosecutors would eventually learn stand for Walter White. In the moment, it almost feels cheap and almost too convenient. A signed book left out in a bathroom of all places. A gift meant to be seen and yet accidentally giving everything away. Fans were stunned, some even frustrated because it felt like luck more than masterful plotting. But that twist ends up being one of the most effective in television precisely because it feels so real. In real life, secrets are exposed by small careless moments just like that. Once Hank realizes who Heisenberg is, the narrative shifts entirely. What was a cat and mouse game becomes a personal vendetta that drives the final season's tension. Walter's fortune, built on ego and careful secrecy, collapses not due to lasers or an outside threat, but because of a personal item left in plain sight. From that bathroom discovery, Hank springs into motion, and the brother-in-law rivalry becomes one of the most intense character conflicts in the series. Episodes that follow hinge on every move Walt makes, and we watch him spiral from clever chemist to desperate fugitive. His luck runs out in ways audiences hadn't seen coming, and yet Breaking Bad pulled it off with devastating emotional precision. It's a stark contrast to what happens in another beloved franchise, The Walking Dead, where instead of letting vengeance take over, Rick Grimes makes a choice that flips the expectation of brutal closure on its head. Just when fans thought the universe would demand blood, Rick spares Negan at the end of season 8, and that twist, like Walter, shouldn't have worked, but it did. On paper, this decision felt like it was designed to irritate fans. Negan had brutalized the group, murdered Glenn in front of everyone, terrorized entire communities, and pushed Rick to the absolute breaking point. Add to that the emotional weight of Carl's death, Rick's own son, who had just died trying to believe in a better future, and the expectation was crystal clear. Viewers were ready for revenge. Hell, they wanted Negan gone. So when Rick stands over Negan in the finale and instead of killing him declares that my mercy prevails over my wrath, it felt like the show was deliberately pulling the rug out from under its audience. And yet, that's exactly why it worked. Carl's final wish was the emotional core of that season. In his goodbye letters, he begged for a future where Alexandria, Hilltop, and the Saviors could coexist without endless bloodshed. That plea was what Rick had been struggling with all season, the conflict between who he had become and who his son believed he could still be. Sparing Negan wasn't weakness, it was Rick choosing Carl's vision over his own rage. In that moment, Rick wasn't just saving Negan's life, he was trying to save the soul of the world they were all living in. What makes the twist even more powerful is that Rick doesn't just spare Negan, he actively protects him. When characters like Maggie and others want to take justice into their own hands, Rick stops them, knowing full well that this decision will create tension and consequences. That choice ripples through the next season, shaping alliances, betrayals, and the very identity of the communities. It wasn't a clean victory, it was messy, complicated, and morally uncomfortable, which is exactly what made it feel real. In hindsight, Rick sparing Negan is one of the most talked about moments in the entire series. It redefined Rick's character, honored Carl's legacy, and gave The Walking Dead one of its most iconic finales. And just like Hank discovering Walt's secret, it was a risky storytelling move that could have backfired, but instead became embedded in the TV Hall of Fame. And that same brutal, emotionally loaded kind of risk is what Dexter pulled off next, when it made a decision that shattered its world completely with Rita's death. Rita wasn't just a side character, she was the heart of Dexter's fake normal life. She was kind, patient, patient, loving, and completely innocent in a world full of lies and blood. That's what made the twist so devastating. To have someone so gentle be taken out in such a brutal, horrifying way felt almost cruel. When it first aired, so many viewers, myself included, couldn't believe the writers actually went there. It felt like crossing a line, like something had been broken that couldn't be fixed. Rita represented everything good in Dexter's life, and losing her in a moment of pure horror was almost too much to process. However, it would come to define the show for the rest of its run. Rita's death shattered the illusion that Dexter could keep his dark life and his family life separate. Up until that moment, Dexter had always somehow managed to get away with it. He killed, he covered it up, and everyone around him stayed safe. But with Trinity, that luck finally ran out. Dexter had let his obsession with being the perfect killer get in the way of protecting the one person who mattered the most. He gave Trinity too much leeway. He wanted to savor the hunt, to learn from him, to control the situation, and in doing so, he opened the door for Trinity to strike back in the most devastating way possible. That single moment redefined everything. Trinity wasn't just another villain anymore, he became the man who took Dexter's wife, the person who did what no one else ever could. It cemented him as Dexter's greatest enemy, not because he was smarter or more violent, but because he hit Dexter where it hurt the most. And from that point on, Dexter was never the same. Season 5 felt like the birth of a new version of him, colder, more broken, and more haunted by the consequences of his own selfish choices. Rita's death didn't just shock audiences, it permanently altered the emotional core of the show, embedding itself into the story in a way fans still talk about decades later. It was a twist that felt cruel, risky, and almost too much, but it made Dexter deeper, darker, and more honest than it had ever been. And just like that brutal gamble paid off for Dexter, another show took a similar risk, but in a completely different way, when the boys decided to turn Butcher's fatal tumor into something far more dangerous with Temp V. By the end of season 3 and throughout season 4, we're constantly reminded that Butcher's time is running out. The abuse of Temp V has wrecked his body, his brain is deteriorating, and it feels like the show is slowly preparing us for his inevitable death. On paper, it looks like a tragic but straightforward end for one of the series' most important characters, the cost of fighting monsters by becoming one yourself. In the final stretch of season 4, it's revealed that Butcher has fully embraced his darker half, the Joe Kessler side of himself, and in doing so, unlocks horrifying new tentacle-like powers that allow him to brutally kill Victoria Newman in a single shocking moment. When that scene hits, it's not just surprising, it's deeply unsettling. Newman had spent so much of the series as a morally gray antagonist, but by the end of season 4, she was actively working toward helping the boys take down Homelander. There was a sense that maybe she could be redeemed, or at least become a complicated ally in the war against Vought. So when Butcher storms in and tears her apart without hesitation, it feels like the show just crossed the line. Viewers, myself included, weren't just shocked, we were worried. This wasn't the reckless Butcher we knew, this was something colder and far more dangerous. And that's exactly what makes the twist so powerful. In one brutal reveal, the series tells us everything we need to know about where Butcher is headed in season 5. He's no longer fighting for Huey, for the team, or even for justice. He's fighting for vengeance, and nothing else matters anymore. By killing Newman, someone who could have helped, Butcher proves that he's willing to burn every bridge if it means getting one step closer to Homelander. His new powers don't just make him stronger, they make him scarier. Because now he doesn't even pretend to care about collateral damage. It's a terrifying shift in the character, but it's also a brilliant one. The show doesn't soften the blow, it forces us to accept that Butcher has crossed a point of no return. And in doing so, it sets the stage for a final season where the line between hero and villain is more blurred than ever. And that idea of a character finally confronting who they really are, even at great personal cost, is what makes the final twist we're about to talk about so unforgettable. When Saul Goodman chooses to confess instead of walking free. For years, fans had been waiting to see how Saul Goodman's story would wrap up. We already knew where Jimmy McGill ended up in Breaking Bad, but the question was always how he would emotionally and morally get there. When the finale reveals that Saul has managed to talk his way into a shockingly low 7-year prison sentence, it feels exactly like the ending his character was built for. He had outsmarted the system one last time. On the surface, it looks like the perfect conclusion for a man who has always relied on charm, loopholes, and half-truths to escape consequences. So when Saul suddenly throws it all away, it's jarring. In court, instead of staying silent and walking away with a deal that would eventually set him free, Saul stands up and confesses, not just to a few things, but to everything. His involvement with Walter White, the manipulation, the lies, the damage. He dismantles the persona of Saul Goodman piece by piece and exposes Jimmy McGill under underneath it. For a lot of fans, that moment initially felt frustrating. After spending years watching him survive impossible situations, it was painful to see him give up a future where he could have walked free in just 7 years. And even though morally he probably deserved life in prison, we had grown attached to him in that strange way that only long-running TV characters allow. But that's exactly why the twist works. Saul taking a life sentence isn't a betrayal of his character, it's the completion of it. For the first time, Jimmy chooses honesty over survival. He stops hiding behind jokes and legal tricks. That final monologue in the courtroom is raw, intense, and deeply human, because it's the first time he actually owns what he's done. In a world where everyone else on this list tried to outmaneuver consequences, Saul does the opposite. He embraces them. And that's what makes it so powerful. The show could have ended with him as a clever survivor, but instead it lets him become something rarer, a man who finally takes responsibility. It's risky, it's heartbreaking, and it's unforgettable, just like every twist we talked about today. It's a moment that easily could have alienated fans, but instead gave us one of the most satisfying endings in television history. If you want to dive even deeper into these topics with exclusive videos, guaranteed replies, and your name featured at the end of every upload, you can become a channel member for just $2.99. It helps out a ton and keeps this content going. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hop into the Discord where we talk about all your favorite shows and media. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.